raving about 24 months ago are now financially worthless, not because they aged out, not because they broke down on the highway, but because China's own automakers are moving so aggressively, releasing better products so fast, that they're making their own previous models completely obsolete almost overnight. And Canadian buyers who paid full retail price 18 to 24 months ago are waking up in 2026 discovering they're trapped underwater on vehicles that nobody in the used market will touch. I'm not talking about obscure throwaway brands nobody's ever heard of. I'm talking about vehicles from BYD, NIO, Xpeng, and MG. Names that have dominated global automotive headlines for 2 years straight. Here's the brutal truth about Chinese automotive innovation that nobody warned you about. When a Chinese manufacturer releases a new model with 200 additional kilometers of range, a new generation processor, and updated autonomous driving software for the same price as last year's model, the old model doesn't just become outdated. Today, I'm counting down 7 Chinese SUVs that have become completely worthless in 2026. And if you currently own any of these vehicles, or were about to buy one on the used market, you need to stay for this entire video before making a financial decision that costs you tens of thousands of dollars. Let's start with number 7, the one that surprised even me. Number 7, the MG ZSEV 2022 to 2023 vintage. This is the one that stings most because so many Canadian buyers jumped on this car as their entry point into Chinese EVs. The MG ZSEV was genuinely impressive at launch. Stylish, affordable, decent range for 2022 standards, and backed by SAIC, one of China's largest manufacturers. Toronto buyers were snapping them up at 45,000 Canadian dollars feeling clever and ahead of the curve. Right now in 2026, that same car is clearing $24,000 at Canadian auctions. That's a 47% value collapse in under 2 years. Here's what actually happened, and this pattern applies to almost every car on this list. The Chinese automotive refresh cycle doesn't operate on Western timelines. Mercedes takes 6 to 7 years to genuinely redesign a model. MG took 14 months. The moment the 2024 MG ZSEV launched with a 440-kilometer battery pack, the 2022 model's 263-kilometer range became an embarrassment. Not slightly outdated, genuinely embarrassing. Like walking into a 2026 smartphone convention proudly showing off a Nokia 3310 and defending the purchase. But range obsolescence was only the opening punch. The 2022 ZSEV was widely leased to Canadian corporate fleets, and those 3-year leases are now expiring simultaneously in 2026. The used market is being flooded with returns all at once. Toronto automotive analyst Michael Park confirmed what dealers across the country are experiencing. We're receiving ZSEV lease returns weekly. 3 months ago, we'd retail them at $28,000. Now dealers won't touch them above $22,000, and that number continues falling as more returns accumulate. The reliability data compounded everything. Early ZSEV units shipped to Canadian markets had thermal management weaknesses in the battery system that Chinese engineers calibrated for Shanghai temperatures, not Ottawa winters. Multiple owners in Montreal and Calgary reported dramatic permanent range degradation after their second winter. Calgary owner Robert Martinez described losing 35% of his range permanently. I bought a 263-kilometer car. By spring 2024, I had a 170-kilometer car. The dealer had no solution beyond calling it within normal parameters. A 35% permanent range loss in 18 months is not within normal parameters. The used market has figured that out. If you're holding a 2022 MG ZSEV in Canada today, your exit window is narrowing every single week. If the MG's collapse surprised you, number 6 is going to show you what happens when a tech company releases a better phone and completely forgets the old one ever existed. Number 6, the Xpeng G3i. This is a masterclass in corporate product abandonment executed at a scale that's genuinely breathtaking. The G3i was exciting when Xpeng brought it to global markets. That helicopter-style panoramic windshield extending over your head, the autonomous parking that could navigate entire multi-level parkades without you inside the vehicle, and a 42,000 Canadian dollar price point that embarrassed European competitors. Early buyers felt clever. They felt early. They believed they were purchasing the future at bargain money. What they actually purchased was a product Xpeng had already mentally moved past. Here's the timeline that should make every current G3i owner uncomfortable. Xpeng launched the G3i in 2021. The G6 arrived in 2023 with 570 kilometers of range on an 800-volt architecture. Then the G9 followed with 610 kilometers and integrated LiDAR. Each new Xpeng launch didn't compete with rivals. It competed with Xpeng's own previous products. And the G3i lost that internal competition decisively. Because Xpeng doesn't perform meaningful software upgrades on superseded hardware, G3i owners are frozen in 2021 technology, while every new Xpeng product leaps forward in capability every few months. Chinese used market data tells you everything you need to know. G3i values in China dropped 55% in 18 months after the G6 launched. Vancouver. G3i owner Sarah Chen paid 44,000 Canadian dollars in 2022 and attempted a dealer trade-in in early 2026. The offer was $17,500. She assumed it was a clerical error. The dealer clarified, "Nobody wants a G3i when a used G6 is available for $35,000. The technology gap isn't worth any discount." A $44,000 car becoming a $17,500 car in 4 years isn't depreciation, it's financial obliteration. What truly twists the knife is what Xpeng stopped doing after the G6 launched. Over-the-air safety feature updates that newer Xpeng models receive through automatic software pushes are simply not deployed to the G3i anymore. You're not just driving older hardware, you're driving hardware with permanently frozen safety capabilities that are falling further behind current standards every month. Calgary Xpeng service advisor Michael Santos confirmed the part's reality. G3i components take 3 weeks minimum to source. G6 parts arrive in 3 days. The supply chain tells you everything about where this model sits in their priorities. Xpeng abandoning the G3i is painful, but number 5 is where the most successful Chinese automaker on the planet made its most loyal early customers feel like they paid to fund research for everyone else. Number 5, the BYD Atto 3 first generation 2022 model. And this one should terrify anyone who assumes that buying the safest, most reputable Chinese brand automatically protects their investment. BYD is the largest EV manufacturer on the planet. In 2022, the Atto 3 was their global flagship SUV. It had 420 kilometers of range, a rotating 12.8-inch touchscreen, and the backing of Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. Canadian buyers paid 59,995 Canadian dollars, feeling completely confident. BYD is the future. What could possibly go wrong? BYD then released the Atto 3 Pro in 2023 with extended range and updated software for virtually identical pricing. The Seal 06 DMI arrived claiming 2,100 kilometers of combined range. The Sea Lion 7 launched with 520 kilometers of pure electric range and a substantially superior interior. Each new BYD product launch didn't target competitors. It targeted BYD's own previous products, and the original Atto 3 lost every single comparison. Current Canadian market reality. A 2022 BYD Atto 3, purchased at $59,995 Canadian dollars, is now trading between $28,000 and $32,000 at Canadian dealers. That's a 47 to 53% collapse in 3 years on a vehicle from the world's most successful EV company. Toronto automotive retailer Jennifer Chen described what she's seeing at auction consistently. Every Atto 3 first gen that comes through, buyers immediately ask why they'd pay $30,000 for that when they can find a used Sea Lion 7 with better range for $35,000. The math doesn't work in the old car's favor. The build quality complaints accelerated the depreciation beyond what the technology obsolescence alone would have caused. Early Atto 3 units exported to Western markets had inconsistent panel gaps that multiple Canadian owners documented photographically. Door seals on a portion of units allowed progressive wind noise intrusion at highway speeds. The rotating screen mechanism, BYD's signature party trick, developed operational issues on higher mileage examples. Edmonton owner Robert Park had his rotation mechanism fail completely at 45,000 kilometers. BYD Canada sourced the replacement part in 5 weeks. I drove with a screen stuck sideways for over a month. Here's the honest mathematics that BYD's marketing will never show you. Their aggressive product refresh cycle that makes their new cars genuinely spectacular simultaneously destroys the resale value of previous products faster than any Western manufacturer would dare attempt. BYD cannibalizing its own prop for products is at least logically understandable. Number 4 is where a revolutionary business model turned into a resale nightmare that nobody saw coming. Number 4, the Lynk Co 01. And this car is a case study proving that a revolutionary business concept and a sound financial investment are two entirely different things. When Lynk Co launched globally, the subscription model was genuinely compelling journalism. You subscribe to a car instead of buying it, share it with other subscribers when you're not driving it, and earn offsetting income. Car media lost their minds covering it. YouTube channels raved about mobility's inevitable future, and some buyers actually purchased Lynk and Co 01 units outright, believing they were investing in something that would grow in cultural cachet the way early Tesla ownership did. Those buyers are now experiencing meaningful financial damage. The core problem is structural. Subscription-based business models create fundamental identity crises in used car markets. When you attempt to resell a Lynk Co 01, prospective buyers immediately ask two questions that have no comfortable answers. First, was this vehicle shared with strangers? What is the actual interior condition beyond what photographs convey? Second, what is Lynk Co actually doing as a brand right now? Because by 2025, Lynk Co had begun actively transitioning away from the subscription model in most Western markets, leaving the brand's fundamental identity completely ambiguous. The "we're not a traditional car company" positioning that generated headlines means absolutely nothing to a Calgary family shopping for a used SUV who simply needs to know if it's reliable and what it will be worth in 3 years. Neither question has a reassuring answer. CarGurus Canada data shows Lynk Co 01 asking prices down 58% from original Canadian launch pricing. A 2022 Lynk Co 01 at $38,000 Canadian dollars is now struggling to find buyers at $16,000. Montreal buyer Francois Dubois explained why he walked away from one in early 2026. "I couldn't determine how many people had driven it or in what condition. The seller genuinely didn't know. I bought a used Mazda CX-5 instead. Zero ambiguity." And if you're thinking the Geely ownership connection provides a safety net because they own Volvo and Polestar, here's the actual reality. Geely's premium engineering resources and brand investment flow toward Volvo, Zeekr, and Polestar. Lynk Co receives secondary attention. Canadian service infrastructure consists primarily of Volvo dealerships handling Lynk Co as a peripheral responsibility. If you're finding genuine value in this breakdown before making a decision that could cost you real money, hit that subscribe button right now because numbers 3, 2, and 1 get significantly more devastating from here. Number 3 is a brand that spent enormous marketing budgets creating the impression of premium Chinese luxury while the actual ownership experience told a completely different story. Number 3. The NIO ES6 first generation. And this one deserves a genuine moment of acknowledgement for every early adopter who believed with complete sincerity that they were buying the future. NIO's brand narrative is legitimately compelling. Battery swap technology that refuels in 3 minutes. The premium NIO House Lounge experience. The Nomi AI assistant that turns to face you and smiles. Canadian buyers paid $72,000 to $85,000 Canadian dollars for first-generation ES6 units between 2021 and 2023, genuinely convinced they were investing in a premium Chinese brand that would accumulate prestige the way Tesla did during its formative years. NIO then released the ES6 Generation 2 in 2023. Then the Generation 3 architecture followed. Each generation isn't a cosmetic refresh. It's a fundamentally restructured vehicle using new platform architecture that renders the previous generation technologically obsolete in measurable, demonstrable ways. The NIO product cycle makes annual iPhone releases look conservative and cautious by comparison. But what makes NIO depreciation uniquely catastrophic compared to every other vehicle on this list is the battery-as-a-service subscription complication. Many first-generation ES6 owners enrolled in NIO's BAAS program, paying 189 Canadian dollars monthly rather than owning the battery outright. When you attempt to sell a first-generation ES6, the prospective buyer inherits either an ongoing monthly subscription obligation or must pay a buyout price for older battery technology that NIO has since superseded with newer chemistry. Vancouver automotive finance advisor Sarah Williams analyzed 3 first-generation ES6 resale transactions in early 2026. Every single deal had the BAAS complication at the center. 2 transactions collapsed entirely because buyers encountered the subscription structure and simply walked away. The pure depreciation numbers confirm the scale of the problem. First-generation NIO ES6 units purchased at $78,000 Canadian dollars are now clearing $29,000 to $34,000 Canadian dollars at Canadian auctions. That's up to 62% depreciation in 3 years on a $78,000 luxury purchase. Calgary first-generation owner Michael Chen articulated what most early NIO owners now feel privately. "I thought I was buying into a premium brand. What I actually bought was the beta test. NIO used my $78,000 to fund the engineering that made my car worthless." The new NIO products are genuinely exceptional, but the first generation paid the full price of admission to what was essentially a publicly funded prototype program. NIO at least has a compelling future that justifies the pain of its early adopters. Number 2 is about a manufacturer that spent enormous resources building a rugged credibility story and then sold Canadian buyers a logistical nightmare disguised as an SUV. Number 2, the WE Tank 300. And this one genuinely shocked me during research, because the Tank 300 carries some of the most convincing marketing positioning of any Chinese vehicle on this list. Great Wall Motor positioned it as China's legitimate answer to the Jeep Wrangler and Land Rover Defender. A proper body-on-frame off-roader with a turbocharged inline-4, locking differentials, a sophisticated interior that photographs beautifully, and serious off-road credentials validated in Chinese desert and mountain terrain. Canadian grey market importers were bringing these in at 68,000 to 75,000 Canadian dollars and finding enthusiastic buyers among off-road communities looking for something distinctive and credible. Those buyers are watching serious money disappear. The fundamental problem with the Tank 300 in the Canadian market should have been obvious before the first unit crossed the border, but nobody wanted to hear it. Great Wall built this vehicle for Chinese consumers, supported by an established domestic service network, local parts distribution infrastructure, and Great Wall dealerships within reasonable driving distance of virtually every buyer. In Canada, that infrastructure simply does not exist at the required scale. The moment a Tank 300 owner needs anything beyond basic consumables, they're facing a parts supply chain that originates overseas with no urgency behind it. Calgary Tank 300, where owner Robert Santos needed a replacement turbocharger hose after a boost leak developed at 35,000 kilometers. A straightforward repair on any vehicle with proper domestic support. I contacted every GWM resource available in Canada. The part took 11 weeks to arrive through a supplier in the UK. I was without my vehicle for nearly 3 months. Total repair cost was $2,400 for a part that should cost $200. The electrical architecture generated consistent complaints across Canadian owner communities. Multiple owners documented the infotainment system entering random reboot cycles during cold starts below -15°C. In Canadian winter driving conditions, that's not an edge case. That's a Tuesday morning in January in Winnipeg. Great Wall's North American technical support response to cold climate-specific issues was described by multiple affected owners as functionally non-existent. The depreciation data reflects everything. A Tank 300 imported at 72,000 Canadian dollars in 2022 is now listed privately at $31,000 and still sitting without buyers, representing a 57% collapse. Worse, there's no functioning resale ecosystem to absorb these vehicles. Dealers refuse trade-ins on models they cannot service. Auction houses are wary of the liability. Private buyers are educated on the parts, reality through owner community forums, and walk away. Vancouver dealer Jennifer Park refused a Tank 300 trade-in in February 2026 with a clear explanation. I cannot in good conscience retail a vehicle I cannot service or source parts for within a reasonable time frame. It's not a car I can stand behind. Great Wall built a compelling product for domestic Chinese consumers. They delivered a financial liability to Canadian buyers. The Tank 300's parts nightmare at least has a logical explanation rooted in infrastructure gaps. What's coming at number 1 represents the most complete, the most thoroughly documented, and the most completely avoidable financial disaster on this entire list. Number 1, the Geometry C, manufactured by Geely. Yes, that Geely, the same company that owns Volvo, Polestar, Lotus, and Zeekr. The same company that has demonstrated genuine world-class engineering sophistication across multiple premium product lines. The same company that absolutely should have known better than to export this specific vehicle to Western markets in this specific configuration at this specific price. The Geometry C represents the most complete and most thoroughly documented Chinese automotive financial disaster currently playing out across Canada in real time. The headline number first, so you fully understand the scale. A 2022 Geometry C purchased at 39,995 Canadian dollars through Canadian importers is currently valued at approximately 11,000 to 14,000 Canadian dollars on Canadian automotive listing platforms. That is a 65 to 72% collapse in 4 years. For comparison, the Maserati Levante, which topped competitor depreciation analysis with 71.9% value loss, achieved that figure over 3 years from a 6-figure starting price. The Geometry C has matched that percentage destruction from a $40,000 starting point in less time with buyers who had significantly less financial capacity to absorb the loss. The quality story explains why this collapse accelerated beyond every reasonable projection. Geely engineered the Geometry C for China's value-focused domestic market and exported it to Western markets with demonstrably insufficient cold climate adaptation. The battery thermal management system, which is absolutely non-negotiable for lithium cell longevity in Canadian winters, was calibrated for Shanghai's operational temperature range. In Canadian winters, the documented battery degradation was severe, rapid, and permanent. Multiple Canadian owners across every major market reported losing 20 to 30% of their rated range permanently after a single winter season. Edmonton owner Sarah Chen paid $39,995 for a vehicle with a claimed 550-kilometer range. By spring 2024, her maximum achievable range was 340 kilometers. I feel genuinely deceived. The car delivered its claimed range for approximately 6 months before permanently degrading. No service resolution was ever offered. The build quality failures extended well beyond thermal management. Owners documented inconsistent panel gaps, water ingress developing around sunroof seals, and interior materials showing premature and accelerated wear at relatively low mileage that was inconsistent with the price paid. Driver assistance features listed in the Canadian market specification sheet were partially non-functional because the software had not been properly adapted from Chinese regulatory requirements to Canadian operational standards. Buyers paid for features on the specification sheet that simply did not work as described. Geely's response through their limited Canadian service infrastructure was inadequate in scope and urgency. Technical bulletins addressing the battery degradation issue were slow to appear. Owners who pursued legal remedies under Canadian consumer protection legislation faced the significant practical challenge of pursuing claims against a manufacturer without a properly established North American legal entity with clear accountability. The genuinely cruel dimension of the Geometry C story is this: Geely is absolutely capable of building exceptional products. The Zeekr 001 we've covered on this channel is magnificent. Polestar produces class-competitive luxury vehicles. The corporate decision to export a budget domestic product to Western premium markets without proper adaptation for those markets was made at an executive level. Individual Canadian buyers paid for that decision personally and are still paying for it today on vehicles that have lost nearly 3/4 of their original value. 7 Chinese SUVs, 7 cautionary financial stories, and 1 shared lesson that every Canadian car buyer must internalize before writing a check for any import vehicle in 2026. China's automotive innovation pace is the fastest in automotive history, and that speed is a double-edged sword with consequences nobody in the enthusiast media was honest enough to explain clearly. The cars getting better every 18 months means today's cutting-edge Chinese SUV could be tomorrow's unsellable liability if the manufacturer decides to replace it with something genuinely superior at identical pricing. Before you buy any Chinese SUV today, ask yourself 3 specific questions. Does this manufacturer have a properly established Canadian service and parts network? Has this exact model been superseded, or is a new generation publicly confirmed? What does the 3-year depreciation curve look like for the previous generation of this vehicle? Which of these 7 hit hardest? Or worse, are you currently holding one of these and doing the math on what it's actually worth right now? Drop your number in the comments, and hit subscribe because next week we're covering the 10 Chinese EVs that will genuinely hold their value through 2027. That is the video that tells you what to buy instead. Peace.